So that's what I have to show today, and the rest of the day will be spent finishing the nominal Sol-1 sequences that we were not able to complete yesterday. And we have to finish those before we can deploy, because we have what we call our insurance pan in there, just in case something happens on deployment, which is actually a very violent activity. Our longerons, that you can see in the model on the left, are thin fiberglass rods built by Able Engineering, and they are coiled down into the base canister, held down by a pin. When we pull that pin, this thing springs up and actually has enough rotational force to coil itself back down again and come up several times. So it's quite a violent operation as we deploy the camera, and that's why we want to have an insurance pan, which is some 280 megabits of data taken around and around. And if something happens, we'll have a tremendous wealth of data to draw from over the next few weeks. It would take weeks to get all that back. So we want to be sure we have that stored in the memory before we deploy. And after we deploy, we're not so much interested in what's in that memory. We're going to take new pictures. So that's happening today. We're measuring the opacity of the atmosphere. We think the dust is thicker than was first thought. It's really quite dusty, and we're going to be studying that dust. Could it have something to do with the dust storm? Well, I really don't know, but it is particularly dusty. We're going to take a close-up view of the soils and down there where they're disturbed, and this will be our 12 filters, lossless. This is our best view of those soils. That'll happen today. And we're going to complete our 360-degree view, and I'll be able to show you that. The one section that remains will be shown at as soon as we get the data and can process it. So with that, I'll turn the microphone over to Jake to talk about the Rover.
Hi. Yes, let me briefly recap the situation that took place yesterday. We had, as you know, we had performed our pedal motion airbag retraction activities yesterday to give us a better chance of being able to correct a problem of airbag drapes over the Rover ramps. One of the things we'll try to do today is to send the commands up to deploy those, at least the front ramp, and get some additional imaging of the rear ramp area so that we may even be able to deploy the rear ramp sometime later today. That will be, that will also accompany that will be the actual release of the Rover tie downs. There's 3 tie downs, one on each side of the vehicle, and a tie down of the APXS. And that will prepare the Rover for stand-up and deployment to the surface. The communication problem, which is the one that we worked late yesterday and overnight, manifested itself as a lack of communication between the complete communication between the Rover and the lander. We have indications from some of the lander telemetry that indeed the Rover has been mightily attempting to send information to the lander to send back down to Earth, and only the shortest frames of information in those communication sessions have apparently been getting through. We are in a position where we can actually request additional diagnostic data that was collected by the lander during the course of yesterday's activities to help us in attempting to isolate what this problem would manifest itself, how it manifests itself during the day. The other things that we did last night as part of the actual nominal execution of activities both on the lander and the Rover were that the lander modem was power cycled several times during the night. The Rover power cycled its communication system every hour overnight. It actually did a full shutdown every hour overnight. And we had some thoughts that this combination of power cycling would be one means of being able to correct what appears to be something like a synchronization problem or other related cause for this absence of communication between the complete communication between the Rover and the lander. Now that information will be, the diagnostic information will be available as well as any telemetry that actually did get through from the Rover to the lander during the 3:30 to 4:30 downlink, 3:20 to 4:30 downlink this afternoon. Prior to that, we'll also try two other things to help us in diagnosing this particular problem. On the lander modem side, we actually have a redundant power converter that supplies power to the lander's modem. We'll attempt to use that and repeat some communication attempts prior to this actual downlink activity. And also, we are going to attempt to send a short command sequence to the rover this morning and see if that gets through. The short command sequence will basically just reset a couple of parameters, and if it gets through, it'll give us some additional information about what portions of the communication link between the rover and the lander are still functioning and functioning well. But through an analysis of that, of the results of those commands, and the analysis of the diagnostic data that we will receive from the lander, we may have some better information and some better insight as to what to try next to ensure that we can reestablish solid communications between the rover and the lander. Again, in all likelihood, some of the things that are already taken place over the course of the last several hours may have already corrected this problem, but we will not know that until later today. And Brian already went through the sequence of events if all the rest of this activity goes well, in particular if we do reestablish communications, and that would include deploying the rover to the surface of Mars sometime later this evening. And that's a good place to stop.
I'd just like to add a couple more things. In response to the requests of one of the reporters yesterday, we will up the data rate just to get down more images for you. We'll be effectively doubling the data rate to about 4740 bits per second, starting with our 320 downlink. In addition, we'll be doing some more science observations. We'll be imaging the magnets. We'll be looking into the atmosphere for dust, and we'll be looking at the windsocks, see what the wind conditions are. So keep that camera busy. So that's all we have.
Okay, we'll go to Q&A here. Let's get a microphone down here in front to Bruce Smith.
I'm Bruce Smith, Aviation Week. The fact that you're just getting the shorter frames in, what does that tell you? I mean, what do you suspect? Or does that narrow down the problem somewhat?
Yes, what we've seen evidence of is that the shortest frames of information have been getting through from the rover to the lander, and that's indicative of a degraded communication link, not an absent communication link. And what we'd like to confirm is at least that of the things we saw yesterday in the telemetry from the lander, that these were primarily associated with activities of the rover's initiation, that is, the rover sending data to the lander or requesting data from the lander. Now, we'd like to check one other communication session, or that is part of our communication link, and that is the ability to be able to command the rover. We had not done that yesterday. If you recall, the sequences we tried to send up late last night probably did not reach the lander and were not executed. So we'd like to do this short sequence as another test to gather additional information about the nature of that link.
Todd?
Todd Halverson of Florida Today for Brian. I'm wondering if you will deploy the rover before the communications problem has been resolved. And if you do give a go-ahead for the deployment at 7:40 p.m., give me an idea of how long it takes to actually get on the ground.
Well, let me say that if we still have this communication problem, we probably can't. We don't know whether it's a one-way or a two-way communication problem. We don't know whether, in fact, we can command the rover, and we'll learn that later today. We don't really have any way to. If we can't command the rover, then obviously we can't deploy it, because it has to stand up on its own. We can release it, but then it can't. It has to drive its wheels together in order to stand up. And so that takes action on the lander's part and on the rover's part. So we need to get this.
Brian Muirhead, who's one of the project managers for the Mars Pathfinder, just giving reporters some bad news. If we can't command the rover, we can't get it to move. This could be a big problem. They don't know whether it's solved or not because of the difference between the light on Mars powering the solar panels and when the rover area on Mars is connected to planet Earth. We got some new pictures. They enhanced some of the pictures they took overnight, and now we know precisely where the Mars Pathfinder is located on the Martian surface. But the headline in all this from Brian Muirhead, the project science manager, is that the rover is at this point stuck there on the Pathfinder lander. It's got its own cameras, as Jim Hill showed us earlier today. And the big goal of this is to get that thing off the Pathfinder, out on the surface of Mars, going around to rocks, sniffing them, finding out what they're made of, and showing us some more of the fabulous pictures like those we have seen in the past 11 hours. We'll take a quick break. We'll come back and talk about more of this and show you the latest pictures with a little explanation. CNN's coverage of the Mars Pathfinder landing continues.